The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. This is Greta Brower with PM Square. We're going to be starting the webinar in just a couple minutes here. We still have several attendees joining, so please stay tuned and we will get started shortly. Thank you.
Hopefully we have some Jeopardy fans in the audience today as we kick off the Jeopardy's greatest ever tonight. If a fan like I am, Ken Jennings coming back, trying to take it to Jeopardy James. Let's see what happens. Are you up on the Jeopardy, Greta?
I'm not up on the Jeopardy, but I'm glad you mentioned something because I will have to tune in tonight.
Nice.
All right, we've given everyone a few extra minutes here. Should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right, so welcome everyone to our Planning Analytics webinar today. As I mentioned, my name is Greta Brower. I oversee the delivery of our services here at PM Square, and today I'll be your webinar MC. With me, the voice that you just heard is my colleague Brian Moore, who joined PM Square actually quite recently and is our Planning Analytics practice lead in the West region. Brian brings a lot of PA strategy and development experience in addition to general leadership to the team, so we're really thrilled to have him on board and also presenting us this webinar today. So thanks, Brian.
Great to be here.
Thank you. All right, before we get started, just a really quick disclaimer. We'll be mainly talking about new features from the latest release or two, but we may mention some forward-looking offerings. This is, of course, just based on what we know today, and any new features or new direction is at IBM's sole discretion, so just know that things could change. Okay, housekeeping. So this webinar is part of a recurring webinar and live stream series that we host. The next virtual event we have coming up is a YouTube live stream with Ryan Daly and Cognos Paul Mendelson, who's kind of a IBM Cognos celebrity. It's later this month, so check out pmsquare.com/events to get information on that. And just a few other comments. As always, this session will be recorded. We'll upload it to YouTube. And then after this webinar, we will send out an email with a link to all registrants and also include any Q&A that comes in through the chat window. So as we go through this webinar, please do jot down questions or just enter them directly into the questions pane within the GoToWebinar toolbar. We'll collect them all throughout and answer them either as time permits if something comes in as we go, otherwise at the end. And if we don't get to something, that will also be answered and included in the follow-up email. Okay, last slide before we jump in and I hand things over to Brian. I just want to mention a little bit about who we are so you know the perspective that we kind of bring to this webinar. So PM Square is a gold level IBM partner. We're focused on the data science and artificial intelligence portfolio stack. Our area of expertise is really well illustrated on this slide, and it includes the entire life cycle of analytics, starting with the box on the kind of the far right side, looking back and reporting on the what happened with Cognos Analytics tool, understanding why something happened across structured or unstructured data with Watson Explorer. Some pieces of that are now part of Cognos Analytics natively. Next is predicting what will happen through tools like SPSS. Operationalizing the process to incorporate all of these items into day-to-day activities throughout tools like CPLEX or decision optimization. And then finally, what we're going to be talking about today on this webinar is planning and forecasting with IBM Planning Analytics, which then just circles right on back to what happened. And so what really all of this means is that we assist customers with all of their analytics initiatives, technical activities like upgrades or health checks, also things more on the change management side, activities like go live coordination or rollouts. And we also specialize in training. We have our own product, one of which is Thrive. We can help with license management, software renewals, and other things like that. So with that said, we're going to jump right into this kind of top square here, Planning Analytics, and talk about the new features, updates in the recent versions, and a demo. So Brian, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks for the intro, Greta. Appreciate it. And yeah, as Greta was saying on this slide, really excited to be joining the team and providing that top area of the planning expertise and really helping increase the company's competency across the whole analytics spectrum. So we do offer full coverage of this entire loop, and we do have nationwide coverage on the planning analytics discipline at this point. Also worth mentioning, some of the best companies in the world, the tech giants, have completed this loop. They do have automated processes in place covering all of these areas, and just about every other company is at least having conversations about implementing this strategy. So we're here to help you make that leap. Anywhere we can supplement in any of these areas, please feel free to reach out and give us a call. All right, what you all came for today, the Planning Analytics server release of 2.0.9 came to us just before the holidays, a little bit ahead of schedule. So happy to have that release about mid-December. And we'll cover the following topics. The past release schedule, I think, will be helpful to give everybody perspective if they haven't upgraded in a while, how often these releases are coming, not only in PA Server, but also in PAW and PAx. We have the new features. We're going to go back a couple versions to just dive into the most relevant, most exciting new features in PA Server, PAW and PAx. And we'll do some demonstrations of some of those features. Also, we'll have support and deprecation notices. So we'll show you what's now supported versus what will be going away or what is going away. And we'll round things out with some notes I jotted down about upgrade best practices and things that'll hopefully help you along your way with any upgrade you're about to do of any of the PA components. One very exciting note about the 2.09 release I don't want to forget to mention is that it is long-term supported. So for those unaware, what that means is IBM will continue to patch and issue fixes for the 2.09 release for at least 2 years, possibly 3 years into the future. So there could be future releases of 2.03 or 2.010 or whatever comes next that don't necessarily get those patches applied, but because 2.09 has been listed as a long-term supported release, it will continue to be patched. So if you're one of those folks that does not like to upgrade very often, want to set it and forget it, then 2.09 is going to be the release for you. So before we continue on here, we want to launch a poll, see where everybody's at. So I'm going to go ahead and click the launch poll. Or Greta, if you want to do that. All right. Everybody see the poll of what version you are currently on? So the options we have here, is it showing up, Greta?
It flashed up and then kind of disappeared. Let me try this again. Here. There we go.
Oh, do we need to relaunch? I think we might have ran the poll already.
Let's circle back to this. Let me see if I can get it re-added here. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. All right, we'll jump into Git Integration and we'll try to redo the poll. But Greta, go ahead and cut me off once you
sure.
Once you get the poll set.
Sure.
Actually, we're on the past release schedule. So here we are with some dates of all the recent releases for folks that might be a few versions back and not really aware of the current release schedule. So we have PA Server is coming out of every 4 to 6 months. Pretty steady release cycle, a lot quicker than past TM1 versions, which might have been 9 months to a year. So we're glad to see new features and fixes coming out more frequently. On the PAW and the PAx interfaces, we're getting those about every 4 to 6 weeks. So PAx, we're getting one every month. That's an agile development cycle. So whether it be fixes or new features, we're seeing something new quite often. So that's really exciting that they're keeping the product modified often and really helping customers add benefits. Over in the right-hand corner, it's a little bit of an ambiguous topic of how should I align my 3 components, the server, the PAW, and the PAx. Kind of rule of thumb is current and 2 releases back. So we have the 209 release having just came out. I don't think there's a package for it in software catalog yet. I'm only seeing it in Fix Central. So we don't know what PAW or PAx version it's going to be packaged with, but current release of PAW is 2.047, PAx is 2.049, and then we'll go a couple releases back from that. Should be fine. And going back several more versions, things are usually okay, but if you are experiencing some issues, that's usually a good first troubleshooting step, is to go ahead and upgrade your components so that they are all on the latest.
All right, Brian, I think we got the poll figured out. Let me just flash that up on everyone's screen really quickly here. It should say, what version of PA are you currently running?
There we go. All right, so we have options of 201 to 205, which should be about 18 months to 3 years old. I was going to mention 209 actually came out on the 3-year anniversary of Planning Analytics. So if you are on 201, you're 3 years old on that version. 206 to 208, so folks that have been upgraded at least within the last year. 209, so early adopters here that in the last month have jumped on that release. Folks that are still on TM1, which is unsupported, unfortunately, as of September 30th, 2019. And lastly, I'm not running Planning Analytics, but interested.
All right, it looks like we've got about 70 plus attendees who've responded. So if you still want to respond, enter that now, and then I will close the poll.
Dum, 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 dum.
All right, we're at 75. That's going to do for today.
All right, let's see some results. Looks like we have most people running 206 to 208 and a lot of new folks that might be coming to us from the Cognos Analytics side. So that's exciting. Glad to have you joining us as well. But yeah, looks like folks are keeping up to date with their PA server. For the 21% of you who are still on TM1, please reach out right away. Let's get you upgraded to Planning Analytics. Not as invasive a path as you might think. Let's at least have that discussion to try to get you over onto Planning Analytics. Thanks for the feedback, everybody. Let's jump into Git. Git integration. It's a little bit of a complex topic for finance folks that might be in the audience, but it's been around a while. It's very pervasive in the software development community. And so essentially what it is a version control system. You can have a Git library, so like a folder on your desktop of different objects for a model or different code snippets, and you can make changes to that repository and then mesh your repository with a centralized repository. This might sound familiar as to kind of what Planning Analytics is, or TM1, where you have a centralized data folder that stores all of the objects. So with the advent of Git, we can now change the objects locally and then mesh our objects in with the centralized repository. And we can do that while the production server is running. So very exciting that that's been kind of a downfall for TM1 of having to schedule outages to do any updates to the model objects like rules or processes or dimensions. So we have to take the production server down and migrate those objects. With Git, we have the option to now do what we call a hot promote. So move those objects in while the server is still running. So something you might want to look into. That itself kind of takes up a whole nother webinar if we were to get into the specifics of that, but just kind of illustrating the topic here on today's webinar. That's been available as of 2/07, about middle of last year. What you need is a local or hosted Git repository, GitHub being one of the main examples, and a tool for issuing Git REST API commands. This cannot be done using Planning Analytics. Most objects you can transport. You cannot promote attribute migrations. You also can't delete objects. So if you are in development and looking to remove or do some cleanup, that's not going to promote through Git. You either have to promote that or perform that cleanup in prod or migrate, take down prod and migrate the whole folder without those objects. And lastly, another feature that Git has is you can set up tasks within the promote either before or after. So you can set up chores or TI processes to run as part of that hot promote. So very flexible, very exciting new feature. Next, we're going to talk about creating a cube by importing a text file in PAW. This kind of reminds me of Cognos Insights from 5-6 years ago that didn't go very well. So hopefully this feature has a better future in PAW. But that's the ability to do a lot more ad hoc, kind of putting objects together or cubes together. So let's jump into PAW here and get to that. Here I have my planning sample. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on cubes. And instead of creating a cube and just selecting some dimensions and naming the cube, I'll choose Import Data. Import data, I have either the option to import data to an existing cube, or I can hit the drop down and choose a new cube. You're going to want to make sure that your PAA agent is working. That's a Windows service that we'll get into a little bit later on the call. But PAA agent facilitates the ability to drag and drop new flat files. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a Windows folder from my desktop. And this file is going to be called finance data. That's in CSV format. I'll drop it in there. We'll continue. That's a quick browse. And I have about 80,000 records here in this CSV flat file. And it gives me a nice preview. A little bit better than typical TI where I only get 10 records. With this one, it looks like I get a whole lot more. So that's pretty neat already. I'm going to go ahead and name the cube. We'll call it finance. And then we see that we have the file I selected. By default, it chooses comma delimited, double quotes for quote characters. There's one header row that looks pretty familiar to our TI experience. Continue on. We have a mapping tab. And so if I go over here to child and I hit the drop down, it helps me remember what I had in the file. Looks like I have 6 columns, account, organization, version, period, department, and amount. I'm going to select account, and then based on those 6 items, I'm going to add enough space so that I can have 5 dimensions, and the final, of course, you need to have a data mapping row because you have to bring in a data point if you're loading a cube. Next, I see cube dimension name, so I'm actually creating the dimensions as well when I'm doing this. So this is something maybe novice modelers can get into and go into the dev environment and really practice kind of some prototyping and some ad hoc model building and really get into it. So you don't necessarily have to have any TI skills to be able to do this. You can just drag in a data source as long as it's in good shape. We have the choice to do parent-child relationship or leaf only. So in addition, we can also build dimensions that are multi or have hierarchical relationships. So if I had a parent-child relationship across 2 columns, then I could relate those 2 columns and build a roll-up dimension and have several levels to it. For this example, we're just going to do leaf on all of them. So I'll flip all those over. And then over on the child, I'm going to pick out all these items just so that I have them visible to me. And then I can name my dimension per what that column name comes across as. Organization, version, period, department, and finally the data points. So that last one's going to be amount. It's going to be numeric because I have numeric values. And over on the right, we notice some additional settings we usually see in TI, whether we want to overwrite or accumulate. So for those code folks out there, that's cell put n versus cell increment n, the decimal separator and thousand separator. The checkbox in the upper right is what I mentioned earlier, that we can do multi-level imports for multi-level dimensions. So if we had a hierarchy within our flat file, we could build that right here in multiple rows of the mapping. All right, last step, I'm going to create cube. Watch the magic happen. 85,000 rows imported in about 3 seconds there. And I open up my cubes rollup. There's finance. And we'll go ahead and throw a view onto the pane, onto the canvas. And voila. Very unorganized, unfortunately, but with a few drags and drops, I can get organized pretty quick here and maybe put together a kind of hacked up P&L. So let's go ahead and sort my numbers. And it looks like I have some balance sheet in there as well, which is all blank. So I will suppress zeros. All right. And so we have months are out of order, but I think you get the idea. Maybe we can just keep quarter 3 of 2019. All right. And then a novice modeler could then have something they could easily filter through, toggle different dimensions, see different departments, and that was all within the course of the last 4 minutes. So exciting new feature, and of course, I always want to stump for PAW and show off visibility features for folks that might not be using it yet. And we can easily just copy that. Copy the cell-based data and paste another copy of it. And easily switch that to a visualization. Looks like account 4200 is really bringing in the bucks, and we don't really need to worry about expenses because absolutely crushed it on a sales account. All right, so again, exciting new feature there that we can quickly mock up a cube in TM1 or in PAW via a flat file. We can do multi-level dimensions if that exists. And I would make the note that other vendors, the competition of TM1, have kind of adopted this strategy of using templates as opposed to a lot of ETL and a lot of back-end work. So let's open up that flat file. They would rely on templates like this, where the Excel whiz can easily massage this data, get it into the right format, and then be able to use something like the new feature we just showed to get it into a modeling tool. So you wouldn't have to write any lines of code, do any fancy ETL work. You could easily just do all the grunt work in Excel and bring that over. And that is creating a cube in PAW by import.
Hey, Brian, we're getting a couple messages in the chat window that some people's screens are stuck on the poll. So I'm just going to go ahead and reshare the poll results and then hide again and see if that fixes the issue. And then I'll hand it right back over to you. There we go.
Okay. Hopefully that wasn't the case. I'm watching the audience view and it looks like it's showing what I'm showing. So hopefully the rest of you caught all that. All right. Next, I was going to show back over in PAW. One quick other feature while we're on this topic, we can now, one of the new features is a column calculation or row calculation, where we can highlight two columns, and it's called aggregate. And what aggregate does is not necessarily simple addition, but aggregate will follow the rules if they are present. And so if there are any like ratio calcs, it would be able to look at those two data points and decide, and then perform an average versus a sum. I had that highlighted in the PowerPoint. That's a little confusing. So here we have volume units on the top row. Of course, if we're going to sum up these three products, that's going to add up to 6,600. The next row is a unit net sales price calculation. And so we want to average those three numbers, and that's what we get in the aggregate column. So it's very nice to have that feature and not have to write a rule to do that or add additional intelligence. This new aggregate calculation in PAW does that out of the box. Unit direct cost, another one where we can see it's shaded in green because it's rule calculated, and we won't want to see those three costs added up. We want to see them averaged. So that's a nice new feature in PAW. All right, drilling options on PAW visualizations. So we've always had the ability to drill down in PAW for a while. Now we have more flexibility in that. So here I have a planning sample cube for P&L by region. And we're, of course, exercising that map visualization every chance we can. That's available in Planning Analytics down to the state level, I believe, or province. Of course, in Cognos Analytics, a lot more flexible. You can get very specific into zip codes and a whole lot more granularity. But here we are, whole world view. You can easily drill down and get into just North America, and drill down and get into just America. So it's the same. And then drill back up. So simple example there, but if you had 5 or 10 tiers to your hierarchy, be very flexible in your visualization to be able to go up and down through the levels. All right, next, this one a little technical, so we'll get into the weeds a little bit on sharing and modifying explorations between PAW and PAx. We have what's being called the PAW content store, which is facilitating the ability to do that. So before, we would have to just copy, kind of embed either TM1 Web sheets or PAx content into PAW. Now we have the ability to create objects and then show and modify them in the other interface. So that can be very helpful. I'm going to start in PAx on this one. So here we have a exploration. And when I'm all done creating the exploration, I'm going to do my Planning Analytics ribbon, and I will click Save, and I have Save to Content Store. Save to Content Store needs to be enabled, so we'll show you the tech setting on how to get there in a minute here. But first, we'll go ahead and save this to Content Store, and we're going to call that PAx Test. I'll put it on the shared folder and save. And if I jump back over to PAW, go back to the welcome screen, I can see in shared that I have a PAW tile. I call them tiles, view tile there, that we have the PAx test. We can jump into that. in Planning Analytics Workspace. And we can go ahead and make changes here, and those would reflect back in PAx. All right, take a breath here. I'm going to get technical and show you how we enabled that. And so for non-technical folks, you might want to take a quick coffee. But this is behind the scenes in our CentOS environment, which is hosting PAW. And if we go to the config folder, we have, and hopefully the resolution's okay. It might be a little small for folks, but you can lean into the monitor. In your config folder, you have the paw.env file, which hosts some paw settings, and then you have the defaults.env file. The defaults.env should never be edited, and that's going to host all your defaults. If a setting is not defined in paw.env, then it's running the default setting. So anytime you want to change settings from the default, you would edit your paw.env file. Let's go vi paw.env. And we see where I have added those first 4 settings are directly from our admin tool that shows how we're connecting with our PA servers and our admin server. And then the final one I added, which is called Enable View Exchange, you can set that to true. So without applying that setting, you're not going to be able to share your PAW explorations with PAx and vice versa. Okay, check my notes real quick. And next we're going to go over to PAx and look at some sharing and modifying explorations. I misspoke there. Here is a slide on the abilities of the PAW content store. So we have some limitations on the TM1 server view, but in terms of sharing content store and MDX views, we have a lot of new capabilities there. So a lot of compatibility. All right, next we have including usernames and memory usage in TM1 Web logs. So this is over on the TM1 Web side, if folks are still using it. Kind of a neat feature, because say you have a user going in and blowing up the memory because they're creating very large views within TM1 Web. We now have a way to track that by user and by memory. So we'll go ahead and get back into the weeds here. And we're going to look at on the TM1 or the PA server, we're going to go into the root location of the install. It's typically on the C drive, program files, IBM, Cognos, TM164, WebApps, TM1 Web, WebINF configuration. And within the log4j properties, we have the ability to set our logging settings at different levels. I think a lot of folks are familiar with this concept, but commonly we keep our logs set to error because that would post the least amount of information and keep the logs simple and concise. So it's good to have them at the least sensitive setting to keep your logs short and only relay the pertinent information. But if you wanted to do more advanced troubleshooting, like we're talking about, you can increase that sensitivity to warning or info or debug. I believe debug being the most granular. So for the second from the bottom here of log4j, logger.com.ibm.cognos.tm1, we set that to debug. And then if we get up one level, we see logs. That's where we find our TM1 Web log. And if we were to jump into, I'll just go ahead and jump into that log file. And I turned it on this morning. We see tons of information, obviously, getting very large already. But we can search that for current heap. And that shows every event of a user accessing a view or a application within TM1 Web. So here, the previous line, we have the username being admin and current heap memory usage 723 meg. We can go ahead and hop down through all the different events and see all the different amounts of memory that each interaction is taking. So again, nice way to audit or do some troubleshooting if you're having some server crashes due to TM1 Web memory usage. All right, now we're going to get back into PAx, and we have quick reports changes where you can see header and dimension names now. We'll show that what we're talking about. And so within PAx, if I were to grab a view out of my planning sample, I'll right click and do a quick report on a new sheet. And so I have that now configured to show my host information, my server information, and my cube information. So before, this information was not available. If we make a quick setting change on the user's laptop, so of course PAx is a local install, so the user would need to apply this change locally. So I'll show you how to do that, and then you'd be able to view those details about those settings. All right, so let's go into Brian Moore's user settings. I need to unhide my app data folder if you don't see it. And local, Cognos, Office connection. We need to create this JSON file. So JSON file is a way that we can apply different variables which enable different settings. So just starting in Notepad, you can go ahead and create a simple one-line little document that you save as a .json. And there's the setting we're looking for, R48, quick reporting, labeling, true. Of course, that's in IBM's release notes if you're looking for the specifics around that, but pretty easy to enable. If you don't like that feature, of course, you can just remove this file or delete that line. And so that is the ability to show host information, server name, and queue name within your quick reports. Other than that, not a lot has happened in PAx. So we've had 5 or 6 releases. It was sometime around the summertime of 2019 that the IBM development team issued a statement that no future enhancements to PAx would be coming until they resolved a lot of issues and bugs that had been stacking up. So the releases July, August, September, October didn't have any new functionality, just bug fixes. But now we're starting to get new features again. All right, so that's all the tutorials I had. We'll get into support and deprecation notices now. Support, I'm really excited about this one. I feel like a handful of customers out there did not get into Planning Analytics Workspace because it required a lot of third-party software, namely a Linux distribution and Docker software, both of which have paid versions and also have free versions. As of PAW 46, IBM is supporting free versions of both Linux and Docker. CentOS is one of the Linux distributions. Red Hat is another one, which you're probably a lot more familiar with, that IBM acquired. And Red Hat, CentOS is a derivative of Red Hat, so they're very, very similar. So by mainly supporting Red Hat, IBM is also able to support CentOS on the same architecture. CentOS, of course, you can download for free, open source, and CentOS is compatible with Docker Community Edition, which is also free. So there's a Docker Enterprise Edition, which has large licensing costs, but Docker's Community Edition is free. And so you'd be able to run both of those third-party softwares together and have an environment for PAW. All you would need to do is provision the hardware. So hopefully that reduces the reluctance on adopting PAW, because of course a lot less red tape now that you have a free compatible version to use. On the deprecation side, we are deprecating relational data sources in TM1 Web sheets as a 207, TM1 package connector as a 207, advanced rules editor and architect and perspectives. We all like the advanced rules editor with all the color coding, very user friendly, but now we have the PAW rules editor if you haven't seen it. So both rules and TI editing in PAW, a lot more user friendly because they have that color coding, and when it comes upon a parameter, it knows how to format it so that you can easily have a lot of better transparency like you had in advanced rules editor. Performance Management Hub, we are now able to operate without it. So PAx can go straight at PAW in order to operate. We don't have to worry about that middle step of using PM Hub as of 207. And then the last two, Operations Console and TM1 Top. I don't know if Operations Console ever really got a foothold. It's been around for quite some time. A lot of folks wanted to stay using TM1 Top. It's very antiquated looking. It definitely did its job as far as server and thread monitoring. So a lot of folks love that. Of course, now we have PA administration in PAW. I'll take a quick peek at that. And so I'm back on the welcome page. I'm an admin, so I see the big I over on the right. And I can see this is the PA administration console, so it can show me specifics on each of the models I'm running, different threads. So a lot of the stuff that we got in TM1 Web, or sorry, TM1 Top, and real time. So we get a nice little visual of what's happening in our server. Other exciting features in PA administration, the ability to upgrade your PA agent. So we go to downloads over here, and we can easily grab the latest PAA agent, which is a Windows service that allows for this console to run. And so you just download, and it'll put a zip folder whatever's local to where we're downloading, and then we just apply that to the PA server. Also, while we're here in lifecycle management, easy way to back up PAW content without going technical. So instead of going on the Linux route behind the scenes, we'd be able to just use a nice interface to make a snapshot of all the PAW objects, which of course are different from the PA objects, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, this is my last slide, so we'll get to questions shortly here. Thanks for sticking with me. Upgrade best practices and notes. Let's always review the release notes and the third-party compatibility. One item in particular, Windows Server 2008, no longer supported as of 2.0.6 for PA Server. So, and that's kind of across the board that a lot of software is not compatible with Server 08. If you have any of those servers laying around, let's try to get those up to 12 or 16 or even 2019. But yeah, those reviewing the notes, you want to see what new features you're getting, as well as possible compatibility issues you might have. Use a development environment with similar specs for testing, especially when folks made the transition from TM1 to Planning Analytics. There was a spike in RAM usage due to member unique names. So the way the architecture was put together to allow for the new hierarchies feature did cause RAM increases. So if you had a development environment with similar specs, you'd be able to monitor that RAM increase before getting over into production and having a surprise on your hands. Always good to use a dev environment offline and not have to worry about interrupting the folks in prod. Next, advisable to uninstall and reinstall PA Server. It has been nice in PA Server that you have the ability to install over the top. So if I'm running 205, I can install 209 directly on top. But there are some config settings that are new or values that have changed that might not be updated properly if we were to just go over the top. So if you have the time, advisable to uninstall, reinstall. It doesn't take you that much more time, and just get you a fresh start. Make backups of PA and PAW files. So we've been used to just backing up the data folder, so the typical TM1 data folder, which holds all the objects like cubes, dimensions, processes, rules. Now we have PAW content. So all of the PAW dashboards and visualizations, and even the PAW content store, which we just took a look at, is all going to be stored in PAW server and Docker images. And we want to make sure we back up that as well. So there's both a technical and non-technical route to do that. We showed you the manage snapshots side, which would be the non-technical route. We want to make sure and back up that PAW content. All right, next, possibly you want to develop automated processes to push PAx out to your clients. If you only have 5 or 10 users, don't worry about it. But if you have several dozen or even hundreds of PAx users, we saw the release schedule every 4 weeks, we're getting a new PAx version. So we want to try to automate that process because we imagine that it will be continuing to happen here in the foreseeable future. It would be nice to have an automated process in place where we can push out that software to our hundreds of users with the push of a button. Don't forget to upgrade PAA Agent. So we just showed you how we can do that. You can download the package directly from PAW. You don't have to go to Fix Central. So whenever you update your PA server or your PAW, you want to make sure and see that your PAA agent is up to date as well. TM1 10.2.2 is no longer supported. Talked about that at the top of the call. Please give us a call right away if you are not on Planning Analytics. It's 2020. I got to get you up to PA and the latest and greatest. And lastly, be bold. Upgrade often. Upgrades are not as jarring as they formerly were in TM1. So this isn't something to be dreaded, especially the incremental releases within Planning Analytics. If we're going from 206 to 209, it's not a 6-month upgrade path. So more often we do it, we get to take advantage of those nice features and always avoid any issues and bugs that new fixes may have fixed. So that concludes my tips and tricks and the latest features in PA 209. Thank you for listening. I'll hand it back to Greta.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was a really great review of the latest features. Thanks for putting that together. Before we get to questions, I mentioned our virtual events earlier. We're still working on getting more events out here, particularly for Q1 2020 and moving into the year. But one specifically related to Cognos Analytics, I just wanted to point out for those of you who are customers of Cognos Analytics are interested in that, is we have that live stream coming up with our team members, Ryan and Paul. We'll be looking at some of the new reporting features in 11.1.5. So make sure to add that to your calendar and tune in if you're interested. There's the URL to get more information on the screen right now. And then also IBM Think is right around the corner already. It's hard to believe, but we'll be in attendance. And if you are too, we should connect. So drop us a line, either reach out to your sales rep, or you can reach out to Brian or myself or any of your other contacts at PM Square and let us know so we can coordinate something. We usually host a reception for our customers, so we'll want to make sure that you have an invite to that once details are confirmed, and we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please, Brian. All right, we have had several questions come in. If you have one, again, feel free to enter it in the questions pane. And if you prefer to connect with us a different way, both my own and Brian's contact info is here on the screen, so feel free to reach out over email or give us a call if webinar chat isn't your thing. Otherwise, we can jump in here. So the first question for you, Brian, is someone's writing here, if moving from TM1 to Planning Analytics, how long is the upgrade process, and does everything convert over?
Great question. And yeah, it sounds like you're one of our late adopters. There are many of you, so don't feel too bad about it. But There is a less invasive path from TM1 to Planning Analytics, where you would just be upgrading TM1 server to PA server. So all the references to PAW or Workspace and PAx or Planning Analytics for Excel wouldn't apply. And you can just keep using Perspectives and Architect and Server Explorer, just like you have been in TM1. Of course, you do want to watch out for that RAM increase. So that's the main culprit if we have any issues. But in terms of the users, they aren't disrupted. They also have TM1 Web at their disposal, so the interfaces would change, and that upgrade path can be pretty straightforward. If you did want to take on the bigger beast of adding in PAW and PAx, one large task in that is converting Perspectives reports to PAx reports. If you wanted to, you can keep running the Perspectives reports, but if you want to fully adopt PAx, you need to modify those reports, some of which will work out of the box, but if they are more technical reports, we've seen that a lot of troubleshooting can be required, and sometimes you have to rebuild from scratch. A great question.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, the next one that came in here, any particular benefits to enabling the setting to share explorations between PAW and PAx, or any reasons not to enable the setting?
Yeah, I would definitely lean towards enabling the setting. This is new, so I think the compatibility is going to continue to get better. Maybe we'll see more views supported, but there aren't any drawbacks I'm aware of, and it's nice to be compatible between the two. You do have some folks that are Excel only, so they just want to stay in PAx, don't want to have to open PAW, but they do need to collaborate with those folks who are the opposite and only want to use Workspace.
Okay, great. The next question is related to the audit log. Does the audit log also work for Cognos Web as well? So I guess, can you use one audit log for both CA and PA is the question.
That's a good one. I would need one of my counterparts on the CA side, Greta, if you have that answer available. If not, we might have to get back to you.
I think in most instances we've configured, at least ones I've been involved in, we've always done separate audit logs, but I don't know if it is possible, if there are some benefits to getting some combined reporting. That is something we can follow up on in the email after the webinar.
Yeah, and perhaps the question is about just having the granularity on specific users and how much RAM they're using. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's available in CA?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good. Good, excellent.
Okay, the next question is any information on future releases in terms of features and schedule?
Yeah, I believe just before the holidays, IBM had updated their product roadmap to see out for the next 18 to 24 months. And so that is posted on their website. I can look up that link and put it in the notes to the presentation. So we will know potentially when the next releases are coming, and we'll definitely know what features are in the works and going to be seen in 2020 and the future. One feature definitely been in the labs for a while that a lot of folks have heard about is what I first heard was called Plans, kind of taking the place of contributor, and that being a way to organize the budgeting process within PAW. So collecting up what templates you're going to use, assigning those to specific user communities, and then kind of having a workflow to oversee the whole budgeting process, as opposed to PAW just kind of having a random collection of tiles when it was first introduced. So that'll be exciting to watch.
Awesome. That was actually the last question. Well, actually, there was one question about sharing the slides, which I didn't directly mention. So we will share the slides in the email that we will send out following up on this, with the link to the YouTube recording if you want to go back and watch or share with a colleague, and also the Q&A document. So yes, we will share the slides. So if there aren't any other questions, Brian, any final thoughts before we conclude here?
No, it's a great turnout. Again, happy to be on the PM Square team, and supporting planning analytics. So please reach out to us, everyone out there. And like we said, it looks like there was a few attendees from the Cognos Analytics side. So know that we have cross coverage. I know PM Square's been the best in the game at Cognos Analytics for a number of years now, and so looking forward to adding that expertise on the planning analytics side. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brian. Yep, so with that, we will conclude the webinar. Thanks everyone for attending. Let's keep in touch, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you.
Thank you.